When Ged moved to Mars, he had rented the smallest apartment he could find, as he wasn't intending to stay for long. But it had been 2 years since he moved here. The place was getting cramped. 2 support tanks filled half the lounge, each storing an organic body, spares, while half the bedroom was filled with a server array, plenty of space to store a few dozen mines, and a spacious virtual mansion. Not that Ged spent much time in his virtual residence, or his physical residence for that matter, though, as one would expect, Ged did sleep here, as he was doing this morning. The sun had risen more than 4 hours ago, but Ged didn't have any contracts right now, so he was enjoying the warmth of the sun on his bed. It was hunger rather than nature that called Ged from his rest. The kitchen here was small, just an afterthought on the end of the lounge. But it was suitable for one. There was always food stocked. Ged didn't like printed foods, or cloned meat particularly, though he would eat either to survive. Ged had found a natural meats market in his first month on Mars. They served a variety of authentic poultry and game, along with a wide selection of line-caught fish. Ged was midway through making himself something to eat when his HUD lit up with a message from the UNS Bounty Commission. It was the biggest bounty he'd ever seen, a cool $1 million for the return of an escaped mental patient. He had apparently escaped through a virtual chat with a family member on Mars, abandoning his body on Earth and taking over his uncle's. The uncle was also offering a reward for the safe return of his body, worth as much as his typical bounties alone. Working quickly, he turned his fried duck scramble into a small stack of sandwiches and loaded up. Every UNS-licensed bounty hunter on Mars was going to be looking to cash this chip, not to mention the unlicensed hunters, who will auction the bounty to the highest bidder. Within minutes, Ged was sweeping out of his apartment and looking into the data on his target. Pan-human body, that's tough, around 3 times as tall and 8 times as heavy as Ged, along with blistering swiftness and hollow projection powers. He and his uncle are both pan-human, so he will know how to use it. The target was an ambassador for the UNS, went crazy and spent the last 3 months in a care facility. According to the reports, his uncle lives in Helium, the same city as Ged, but he is likely headed for Zelanka, so he would take a train. Ged ran through the streets of the city, headed for the fast train, jumping over Martians on his path. Ged made good time to the station, arriving just 10 minutes before it departed, though he lingered on the platform until the last minute, spotting the former ambassador board the train with just moments to spare. Ged made sure to board on the same car, sitting several seats behind him. The train pulled away from the station as scheduled, headed west for Zelanka. The train travelled at hundreds of kilometres per hour, but would still take many hours to reach its destination. But Ged could make no move against his bounty here. The Martian security forces will put a swift stop to any violence on the transport network. Within 10 minutes of departure, Ged saw 3 other faces he recognised. Bounty hunters all. If they take him down together, the bounty would have to be shared, but $250,000 would do Ged just fine. More than enough for a pod ship. All virtual decks, but cheap. The former ambassador was mumbling about Kraken. Even with his sharp ears, Ged could make out nothing but their name, spoken with spit and loathing. Zelanka City is the centre of the Martian Kraken population, making up a fair percentage of the people you encounter there, especially along the waterfront. No matter what, this was going to get messy. The duck scramble sandwiches slowly disappeared as Ged watched the ambassador, studying every action and sound. The ambassador seemed to drift in and out of sleep, often showing a moment's surprise about where he was, before returning to the muttering. The ambassador was carrying no weapons, at least none that Ged could detect, though his clothes were clearly polyplastic, set to mood response mode, making the clothing shift with frantic and unpredictable movements. Very easily a danger to Ged and the other hunters in the hands of a trained madman. The train made no stops on the journey, but the sun settled low on the horizon by the time the train came to Zelanka terminus, decelerating for the last hour of the trip, before drifting to a gentle stop at the platform. The former ambassador awoke with a start, realizing the train was settling at the station. He and two of the bounty hunters got to their feet, but the ambassador turned and broke into a sprint, departing the train and accelerating to incredible speed. Ged leapt from his chair and landed on all fours, allowing him to hit higher top speeds than most, though he was still somewhat shy of the ambassador's ability. Already clear of the platform and headed for the surface, only one of the other bounty hunters could keep up with Ged. Carla is a Martian canine, able to move on all fours when she needed to, but a 50-50 split is definitely better, maybe even a ship with some actual deck space. By the time Ged and Carla reached the surface, the ambassador was well ahead, not even in sight of them, but he had left a trail of fallen Martians. He was clearly headed for the coast, so Ged and Carla were hot on the trail, racing toward the seafront area where he would be already if he knew the city better. But the distance would slow down most bounty hunters on Mars. Few bounties can hit such high speeds. But the ambassador didn't get to the beach. As they rounded the first corner from the station, they found him. He had found a Martian kraken. The Martian kraken is a little different from most others, covered in a soft, red, synthetic skin, smaller than most other kraken, and they actually have eyes and a mouth, making them the most approachable of all breeds of this android AI species. The ambassador clearly had anger issues with the kraken, doing something that Ged, and from her expression Carla, had not seen before. The ambassador was attacking a kraken in the street, his physical size and power enough to rip tentacles from his victim. Despite being an android body, the kraken's insides looked very much like that of an organic body, soft organs and vital fluids spraying over the ground and ambassador. Other Martians were screaming and running from the site, causing a panicked swarm of people to rush toward Ged and Carla. Ged began to leap over the crowd, using the occasional panic-stricken Martian as a stepping stone for the jumps. Carla barreled through the panicking crowd, scattering some to the floor and picking up speed toward the ambassador. In the last moments of her sprint, Carla had lowered her head and straightened her spine, fully intending to ram the ambassador, but she never had the chance. The ambassador spun round in the last moment, his right leg extending into a powerful kick to her side. The impact caused Carla to be launched through a shop window, crashing through hand-carved furniture and disappearing into the shop's interior. Ged was back on two legs, running at the ambassador with care, soon bringing Ged into hand-to-hand distance. Sliding low and taking advantage of his small size, Ged aimed for the ambassador's legs, slashing with his clawed feet. The polyplastic clothing had become hard and protective, reducing the harm of the slash to minor damage. The ambassador raised his other foot and attempted to stamp on Ged, but he quickly rolled aside, pushing off from the floor to get back to his feet. But as Ged recovered his footing, a left hook of the ambassador struck Ged in the side of his face. Ged felt something break. The power of the hit lifting him off the ground and throwing him meters from the ambassador. The pain of the hit was quickly gone, his software systems blotting it out as he hit the ground. The sudden lack of pain and additional of adrenaline allowed Ged to roll to his feet quickly, but the ambassador was sprinting away. Ged broke into a run after him, vaguely aware of the sounds of broken glass and furniture being knocked aside. But the ambassador's next target was not far down the street. Another kraken had stepped from a shop. It only realized the ambassador was attacking when he barreled into it at full sprint. Ged wasn't far behind, his nose and mouth bleeding from the hit, and a loose tooth hanging from his upper jaw. The ambassador's hand plunged into the kraken's eye socket and ripped an oversized eye from its face, while repeatedly kicking its body. The kraken had already abandoned the body, evident by its sudden limp tentacles, though this was not sufficient for the ambassador to stop its attack. Ged arrived moments later, leaping at the shop wall and rebounding toward the ambassador, claws extended and taser glove at the ready. The ambassador turned to strike, but Ged was ready for the attack, rolling his body round the fist and raking his claws across the ambassador's face. The attack left Ged on the ambassador's chest, his clawed feet clinging to the violently shifting clothing. But it was a very unsafe place to be, so he dropped downward, hitting the ambassador again as he did. The first attack had left the ambassador bloody, his right eye closed and damaged. The second was a strike from the taser glove, discharging a large burst of electricity into his cheek. The blow caused the ambassador to stagger backward, stumbling over the limp tentacles of his latest victim. Ged landed safely, 3 paws on the ground and his gloved hand still crackling with electric, when Carla, somewhat bruised from her earlier encounter, rushed into his field of view, her charge striking home this time, hitting the ambassador in the legs with considerable force and weight, the strike causing the ambassador to spin to the ground. Ged could hear the sirens of the Zelenka police. They'd be here soon, so he leapt for the ambassador, taser glove first, landing on his chest and punching the ambassador full in the face. Though he was unable to cause as much damage as the ambassador had, the discharge from his glove would have to do instead. The blow caused his eyes to flutter wildly and his limbs to thrash, making it a challenge to remain on his chest. But Ged dug in his claws and held, keeping the glove firmly pressed into the ambassador's face. Moments later, Carla leapt on the ambassador's arm, helping hold him fast and allowing Ged to slap a neural band on the thrashing body, blocking him from uploading and activating his attack programs. The digital attack caused the ambassador to go limp, allowing Carla to turn her attention to the police, showing her hunter's license and preventing Ged or herself from being arrested. The ambassador's defences were tough, battling with the attack programs for control, so Ged hooked into the ambassador's clothing. Hacking it was much easier, allowing Ged to decide its form, so he set it to cocoon the ambassador in a hard shell. Finally, able to take stock of his surroundings, Ged noticed the other 2 bounty hunters had arrived, though they couldn't claim this bounty, so they were standing with a crowd of looky-loos, all hoping to discover what happened and gawk at the bloody Kraken body and bounty hunters. Still sitting on the cocooned ambassador, Ged rubbed his cheek softly. The bone was broken, the eye swollen and bloody. He was glad he couldn't feel the pain, but he could relieve the swelling with a nick from his claw, letting blood pour over the fur and letting the swelled eye begin to open. Carla was grinning at Ged as she spoke to the police. 2-way split. Not a bad day's work. Plus the reward for the body. Ged would soon be off Mars and on to bigger and better things.